All right, well, we're going to talk about candidates for the State Assembly District 24 today, and I'm thrilled to welcome our colleagues from the Almanac newspaper and the Mountain View Voice, Mark Noack from The Voice.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome. And then Kate Bradshaw from the Almanac.
Happy to be here.
And of course, Gennady Sheyner from the Palo Alto Weekly. So there is a wealth of candidates this year. We have 8 for the primary on June 7th. This is, again, since Prop 14, we're looking for the top 2 vote getters in June, and those 2, regardless of party, will go on to the November election. And the 3 of you have been writing about these candidates. You've profiled them, kind of gotten a feel for their stances. So we'll go over some of the state issues and how everyone kind of sorts out in terms of their philosophies and ideas. Just bring that to our viewers. I thought we would go alphabetically through the candidates. Oh, and I should say, so the district itself, where's the district? It's from Woodside down through Cupertino, and also including the San Mateo County coast from El Granada down south of there. So people who are in there, pay attention. Mark Berman, a city councilman for Palo Alto, first up on the alphabetical list. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about who he is, why he's running.
First in the alphabet and first person to announce his candidacy.
That's right.
Yeah, Berman first contemplated running in 2010, but he had a brief flirtation with challenging Rich Gordon, but then he withdrew earlier in that race. And instead, he's been focusing on local issues. He was elected to the city council in 2012. He's just completing his first term there. And back then, he told me that after seeing, like, it was actually the last time we had a competitive race. I'm so happy for this one to finally have a race.
Yeah.
But back then, after Rich Gordon, Yuri Kishimoto were vying for the spot, and then Josh Becker came in, that kind of prompted Berman to withdraw because he realized the odds aren't so good, too many candidates, that kind of thing. So he's been spending a lot of time talking about infrastructure, kind of looking for ways to encourage more housing, getting more involved at the grassroots level, and now having got some local experience under his belt, he's ready to try again, this time with Gordon's support.
Okay. He's not the only one who's trying for office again. I believe Jay Cabrera is the next one. Jay Cabrera, in some ways, a perennial candidate.
Yeah, he's trying again and again and again.
He was running for school board, I think, the last that we encountered him in Palo Alto.
Yeah, and from talking to Jay, it seems like running for him is the game. It's not just a means to an end. It's kind of is the end. Not to take anything away from his campaign, but this is like his 5th or 6th time running for things, and he hasn't had much success, but he's very passionate about kind of the ideals of his campaign. He calls himself a Bernie candidate, so he just kind of wants to get the conversation going towards kind of bringing the Bernie Sanders ideals to the Assembly District 24 campaign.
Yeah, he has a vision for democracy, and he is promoting it in his campaign.
Yeah.
Stanford resident, I think.
Right. Stanford resident.
Okay, and then we go a little bit south. Barry Chang, mayor of Cupertino.
Yeah. Barry, he's very, very excited to run. When I talked to him, it was clear that he was singling out transportation as sort of his centerpiece issue of his campaign. He points to a lot of stuff. He's been as mayor of Cupertino. He points to a lot of stuff during his tenure as serving on the Cupertino City Council as sort of why he's well experienced to run. I sort of thought he was just pointing out to the things that everyone would know about Cupertino. He said that he pointed out to his experience negotiating with Apple over their spaceship campus, and he said that that he would just really push them hard to be able to provide as much community benefit as possible. And curious thing about that is that he was only one of 3 candidates on their 5-person council who actually could even vote on that project, even though it was probably the biggest vote in recent memory that Cupertino's had, but 2 of their council members had to withdraw and recuse themselves on that.
They lived nearby or had some relationship to Apple, I suppose.
I can't recall specifically, but one of them I had some sort of work experience with Apple. The other one I can't recall right now. Barry, he has a lot of support. I think he's tops the fundraising of all the candidates as of the last report. He has a huge support from the Asian community in Cupertino, if you look at his donors. He does have a very sizable base. He also points to education, his time on the Cupertino, on one of the school boards, and that was actually his entry into politics. So he's able to make a good argument that he has a good across the board experience. I
Okay,
think.
so there's a good track record at the local level, lots of experience there. Okay. I believe John Inks, alphabetically, is next.
Yeah, Mountain View City Councilman. He is a very interesting fellow. He is, you know what you get when you with John Inks in that he is a diehard libertarian, very much about low taxes, small government, personal liberties, and he votes along that trajectory. As long as I've been covering Mountain View City politics, which has only been about a year now, he has been as consistent as it gets in voting as a libertarian, and he was kind of a little bit of a wild card in this race because the other city councilman from Mountain View in the race, Mike Kasperzak, has been doing this very exhaustive campaign. He started, late last year, prepared for a long time, and then Inks comes in just a month and a half ago, maybe a month ago, and just sort of like, what? Suddenly he's a new guy, a new eighth candidate in the race. And Inks, he's a little bit, he's interesting to follow as a politician because you think about politics as being kind of like the art of compromise, and that's not his philosophy at all. He very much he very much is a man of principle, and if there's something that he disagrees with that's on an agenda, he will very much make his views clear and upfront from the start and vote no. And he won't really try to persuade other people. He just sort of, this is not why I was elected, and so I'm going to vote no on this.
Yeah.
And I've never really seen him try to broker a compromise on policy. That's not to say he's not capable of it, and that's not to say that he doesn't have a lot of support. A lot of people are very much like Inks because they feel that he represents sort of an underrepresented, contingent in Mountain View.
And I think that's what you said in your profile of him, that he believes he is called to be in government to represent that kind of voice and to stand for it, and to be the person other people can turn to if they share his philosophies as well. Now, Mike Kasperzak, you mentioned him briefly.
Is he next?
So he is next. I think K after I believe. And he has a long record, certainly, and not only at the local level.
He says that he has the longest record of all the candidates in this race. He says, I think it's 22 years in public service as essentially a volunteer in small town government. So yes, he points to his time on the Planning Commission. He's now ending his 4th term as a city councilman. And Mountain View has a system where council members can't run more than 2 consecutive terms, but there's no rule against them waiting a few years, then running another 2 terms. So that's what Mike Kasperzak has done. He's an attorney who now does binding arbitration and mediation as a practice. Very, very smart guy, and is clearly very passionate about the community.
He also has some state experience in the League of Cities, I believe, that he's been involved in that group. So
I don't doubt it.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on to Peter Otaki, Menlo Park.
Yeah, so Peter Otaki is the only Republican in the running, and he comes with a history of growing up in Menlo Park, being a local resident. He served as a CFO for a tech company and now works in emergency management and has sort of worked for about 10 years trying to promote emergency preparedness with various agencies. So one of his big priorities is promoting public-private partnerships.
Okay.
And that's something that he sort of is interested in seeing expanded. And then some of the other things he's concerned with are things like unfunded pension liabilities and kind of reducing those and balancing budgets. He calls himself a numbers guy.
Okay. Certainly the unfunded pension liability is a huge issue for the state and for local jurisdictions. Okay, great. So Selam Reddy, back to you, Gennady, for the last 2.
Yeah, C. Reddy, a familiar name to people who go to city council meetings, a small minority. But he kind of became better known around Palo Alto a few years ago when he ran for the city council. Didn't do that well in that race, but he's been pretty much a regular attendance at meetings, and you kind of never know what you're going to get when he's going to come to the mic because he talks about every issue under the sky, and so he's calls himself the ideas guy.
Yep.
Many of his ideas are kind of broad and vague, and
Uh-huh.
hopefully we'll learn a little more about what they actually mean as the campaign goes on.
Okay, and he's retired from a career, correct?
Yes, he worked for various like aerospace companies, engineering, mergers and acquisitions, and he recently retired.
Okay.
So that's his new thing.
Yeah, and finally, Vicky Vinker.
She has one of the most interesting track records I've seen because she's been involved in, she's a patent attorney. She's worked with like Nobel Prize winners, and she's helped found a women's soccer league. She worked as the board president of the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley. So she's done a ton of stuff, but she has not really been involved in politics up until now. And but despite that, she's been very successful at getting contributions and endorsements, and has a lot of ideas for statewide issues that she's been dealing with in her other roles.
Yeah, I think the top campaign fundraisers so far are what? Chang first, Berman second, and then Vinker.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, there are a ton of issues facing our state right now, and you tackled some of those with your candidates. Let's just talk, for starters, about high-speed rail, which is the big $64 billion minimum project that voters approved several years ago. A little bit of a diversity in the candidates on whether this is a good thing, bad thing, whether it's being managed responsibly. So let's just throw out some of the candidates' viewpoints. Who generally is opposed to the project altogether?
I think most of them are. I think, with the exception of maybe Mike Kasperzak, I believe, supports it, and
Chang supports it too, I think.
Oh, Chang.
At least he wants it done
has some
differently,
nuanced
but
views.
in principle, he's not against it.
Yeah, are we talking about in principle or how's it's going? Because I think there's a lot of difference within
yeah.
candidates. Most of them say they like the idea, but hate the way it's being implemented.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, I think those who are, we'll take those who just say this is a great idea and don't really have the hesitations as others do. I think Cabrera is one of them.
I think Jay Cabrera is probably the most idealistic about it, even though he has some concerns about the way it's going.
Yeah.
And I imagine Mike Kasperzak would probably be among the more bullish on the rail line.
Yeah.
And I would say at the other end of the spectrum, Steve Reddy just flat out opposes it, and you have kind of more moderate views espoused by Mark Berman and Vicky Vinker, in a sense that might be a good vision, but they don't like how the project's being run. They think it should stop in the peninsula, and then you can kind of reevaluate it from there.
Yeah, the tie-in with Caltrain is kind of an interesting element to this whole thing, because for us, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, or the rail hits the, the train hits the rail. And Otaki, I think, he's not terribly in favor of high-speed rail.
He says that he would rather see that $64 billion go towards improving local transportation infrastructure.
Okay.
And sort of helping local commuters.
Yeah, and that seems to be one of the safer viewpoints for people to hold, really. Maybe not the financial diversion of funds, but just the focus on local infrastructure and how important it is to have Caltrain modernized and electrified and all of that.
I think that's been one of the major themes through all 8 campaigns, I think, actually. Or at least vast majority of them, the idea that you have to invest more in Caltrain and regional transportation improvements. And, if high-speed rail happens, maybe it'll happen someday, that's fine, but the focus should be closer to home.
Yeah. One thing that I kind of wonder about with the candidates is for the modernization of Caltrain, and there's an idea of tunnels or grade separations, at least, on the intersections with the roads. I'm not really hearing where the money to fund that would come from, and I'm wondering if any of the candidates have an idea.
Oh, the VTA tax that's coming
Okay.
in the fall. That's being thought of as kind of the seed money that's not going to pay for the few $1 billion it would take to do the whole thing. But if you can get, I've heard various numbers tossed around recently, 800 million, 600 million. That's kind of the range where it stands now, and it seems like the kind of regional powers that be, the business group and VTA are kind of on board with at least making this initial investment. And then after that you could have other sources like cap and trade, of course, is going to high-speed rail predominantly, but the idea is you will get some funding sources after you get this kind of seed money.
Okay,
first.
very good. Education, huge issue, and some really unique ideas, I think, about what should be provided to the populace for free. Early childhood education, college, where do the candidates stand on those?
I could speak for the candidates I interviewed, and then we could maybe hear from Mark and Kate. But I know
Okay.
Mark Berman, during the Assembly Forum, spoke a lot about the fact that state needs to fund education pretty much for all 4-year-olds, the pre-K education, all that. That should be universal. And, Vicky Vinker is also really kind of bullish on raising money for schools through extension of Proposition 30, the 2012 bond that kind of raised taxes temporarily for education.
Specifically for education, yeah.
Yeah, and she's also really enthusiastic about investing more in community colleges and universities and promoting STEM education, those kinds of things. And,
one of your candidates wanted free education. I believe that was Cabrera, free college education for all.
The Bernie candidate wants free college education for all, which is consistent. The person paying for it, and C. Reddy thinks parents should spend more time with their children, and we should promote more charter schools.
Okay, very good. Charter schools came up in someone else's interviews as well. Kate,
yeah, so Peter Otake seems interested in also reform to Proposition 30. He was concerned with increasing allowances for schools to raise funds for capital improvements to schools.
So he wanted to see more of the capital improvement funding going towards schools.
Yeah,
okay, definitely. Mark?
Well, let's see. Kasperzak and Chang, they both very much zeroed in on supporting preschool, early education, as far as that being a priority. Inks, however, is sort of, just more kind of said, hey, we need more support for education, we need to improve academic results. And honestly, I think it's fair that for anyone running for assembly, this is probably education statewide is probably one of the most complicated things to try to, what's the magic bullet solution for it. Right. And so, when I was asking candidates this, some of them admitted, I got to do more research on this, and this is something, I'll get back to you at a future date. And that's when they came with, zeroing in on, preschool and early education is something that they felt like was the best thing that could happen as far as a change in California.
It seems like there's an agreement kind of there that for those populations that don't get early education, then the consequences they just start unfolding in elementary school and middle school, and the gap just gets wider and wider. So it does seem like there's agreement among the candidates on that. At the February forum, which you covered, Gennady, there's an interesting question about funding of transitional kindergarten, and I guess Brown was proposing take that funding away, put it more into preschool. And there were a number of people who kind of stood up and said that they weren't really in favor of canceling transitional kindergarten funding.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think Brown proposed some kind of a flexible block grant program kind of, people to decide. I think most candidates did not support it. They offered different views. All kind of agreed that you need to spend more money, and there was a general consensus that pre-K spending should be kind of a priority, but slightly nuanced views on other issues about education.
Okay. Let's move on. Infrastructure. Some $60 billion of needed repairs in the state. Pretty daunting, whether that's for roads, schools, buildings, power, communications, what have you. At first, it seems like everyone's talking about roads and public transit, but there's a little bit of nuance in addition to that as well. I don't think there's much disagreement that roads need to be improved, highways and public transit. But then some people took different slants on that technology, for example.
Yeah, I mean, in Mark Berman's case, for example, it's not just the roads, it's the infrastructure for like electric vehicles, having ways to plug them in, kind of promote those kinds of emerging technologies. So it's not just
a new kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. And also he's really into like smart grids and that kind of stuff. That sort of infrastructure, not really the brick and mortar, even though, I mean, that's part of it too, but he's more thinking about the future of commuting and how California can accommodate that.
Yeah. Inks was a little bit broad. I think he mentioned water and water systems, or parks and...
Yeah, parks, water. I think he zeroed in on roads too. And it wasn't so much the sense I got from him was it wasn't so much the specifics of the projects. I think he, like any other assembly candidate, recognizes that there are infrastructure needs in California, but it was also, what was most important to him was that it be handled in a market-oriented fashion that would, basically not, create new bureaucracy, drive up taxes, and I mean, he's a man of principle, and that's another example of that.
There you go on that. So he would form sort of public-private partnerships, or he would find other ways to, or just entire privatization, I suppose.
presumably.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and Vicky Vinker also spoke a lot about education is kind of one of her biggest themes of the campaign. And when she was asked at the February forum, like if she could talk to Jerry Brown about one thing pertaining to his budget, her answer was quickly education, education, education. So, and when I asked her about the infrastructure question, fixing like outdated schools is also a big part of it. So,
Oh, okay.
well, roads is kind of the thing that binds everybody. I think she kind of goes a little further than others on education.
Yeah, I think she also mentioned water infrastructure as well, which I thought
did.
was kind of interesting. And Chang did too. These issues are kind of overlapping because then we get into recycled water a little bit later when we talk about climate issues. But okay, well, let's move on to affordable housing locally. That's just such a huge issue. I mean, who can afford to live, around here unless you're a VC or something like that? So that's one of the factors that people have been talking about a lot, especially as it focuses on diversity of the populace, commuting times, which lead into congestion, which leads into the ability or inability to hire people because they don't want to drive from 40 miles away. What are some of the solutions that people are proposing at this point of the candidates? What do
More
they
housing.
favor?
In a nutshell,
Let's just
I
get
feel like
it, yeah.
everyone was saying that. At least among the candidates I was covering, Casper Zach, was all for it, and that's kind of the theme of Mountain View right now. Is we got to build lots of housing, and hopefully as quickly as possible, and that's sort of the momentum that the city has.
What's the mean to that end? I mean,
That's a
I
good
think-
question.
I don't think people disagree. I don't think people disagree that more housing would fix the housing shortage. But
Yeah, and where
I think
also.
the how-
So
Exactly,
it's the
yeah.
nuances where the real devil's in the details. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
some of the candidates I spoke to had some details.
Okay.
Like Mark Berman strongly supports a tax credit for low-income housing, which is something that the Assembly was considering passing, but it was, I think,
Okay.
vetoed by Jerry Brown. So he feels strongly that should be brought back. Get some tax breaks to people who are into that. And Vicky Vinker supports more inclusionary zoning. If somebody builds a market rate housing, you have to include a few units, a percentage of the units for low-income residents. And
Yeah, that one seems kind of a commonality that there are a number of people who feel that whether it's mandated or incentivized, that's a good thing.
yeah, and she also supports like housing bonds, things like that. Putting out a bond for more housing.
Okay. And it also seems like there's universal agreement, and again, these may seem like the easy stances to hold, but transit-oriented housing, as well as housing around jobs, where the job centers are.
Except C. Reddy's kind of the outlier.
Oh yeah,
He
I thought he was fanciful, maybe.
he
in
was
his-
he was a little fanciful in that he says that so many people here have big houses with extra rooms. We should find ways to encourage them to open up these rooms to other people who need housing, which could make for many interesting sitcoms. But I don't know if the state assembly is ready to go that route yet.
Right. Well, if he gets elected, we'll see him try. Also, I think some of the Mountain View candidates had some interesting details. Casper Zach talked about there's just too much litigation against developments, construction defect litigation, and I think he wants to address that issue. And then Inks was talking about bureaucration.
Yep.
So the lawyers talking about litigation
like him,
and the
really,
libertarians
it's
talking about bureaucracy.
Yeah, that's hampering development. And I thought that was a kind of interesting issue that the candidates have been dancing around a little bit, where they want to encourage affordable housing to be included and built, but they don't want to have so many requirements that it's onerous and developers decide to do something else, go into the commercial space instead or something. Yeah. Okay, climate change. Yay or nay?
That was a tough question for many candidates to answer in one or two sentences.
Yes.
Well, I don't think
Yeah.
in the 24th Assembly District you're going to get any nays on this one from these eight. The idea that it's not a threat. At least
Okay.
as far as I'm concerned, everybody here acknowledges that it's something that something has to be done about. I think most solutions have to do with reducing driving from the people I spoke to.
Okay.
Find ways to kind of reduce emissions by encouraging electric vehicles and kind of develop it in your transit to reduce driving. So I think transportation is kind of the number one solution the people I spoke to offered up for addressing climate change. There's some others maybe from other candidates, but that's kind of been the common theme.
Yeah, renewable energy, green building standards. I think Otaki mentioned green building standards. A little bit.
Sort of promoting LEED as a standard for new developments, encouraging purple pipes, and then also he talked about increasing renewable energy through community choice energy programs like Peninsula Clean Energy in San Mateo County.
Okay. I'm just starting to hear more about that, the community choice programs. Has that been going on for a while then?
It's in the works. There's sort of a process to have it rolled out later.
People opt into renewable energy sources, that sort of thing. Okay.
I think Jacob Rare has an outlier idea about climate change.
Oh, what's that?
Allowing people to represent nature in court.
That's right.
The right to nature thing.
That's right.
From interviewing him, he said it's done in some South American countries. He thinks it would be great if kind of nature had the same stature as people as far as representation to make sure it doesn't get abused. And he also has ideas about designing, like kind of revolutionizing the way California designed its products so that everything is sustainable pretty much forever. And there will be no landfills.
So if there's a product and it's all reusable, or you can take it apart and recycle it, or what have you.
Yeah, that's right. And Vicky Winker also really supports the cap and trade system and thinks that should be expanded.
Okay.
Generate money for efforts to reduce climate change.
Great. I think Berman was the one who also mentioned sea level rise of that as a high priority and concern.
Yeah, it's an overarching theme in talking about infrastructure or climate change or many of the other issues.
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to touch upon recreational marijuana. And Gennady, you were saying earlier before the webcast that this may not be even a legislative issue. Yet it's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the voters are probably going to be voting on it in November, so whoever gets elected, I mean, unless they try to overturn whatever gets voted in, it might be a moot point by the time we know who the winner is for this. But they do have like a range of views on medical marijuana.
Recreational marijuana.
Recreational marijuana, right.
Yeah.
That's right, medical marijuana pretty much most people support.
Right. So who just doesn't want recreational marijuana to be legal?
Barry Chang doesn't.
Yeah. And he inhaled once, I believe. So.
He didn't mention that in every forum.
That's every forum. Otaki sounds
he said he
opposed.
wasn't ready yet, but
wasn't ready for legalization. And then decriminalization, different than legalization. Inks, maybe not surprisingly, says, okay, well, people can do what they can do.
Yep, that's freedom of choice.
Let's not bring on this whole infrastructure of taxation and law enforcement and what have you. Just let it be.
I think the way he phrased it was, I don't recommend anyone inhaling burned dried substance or something like that. However, sure, if you want to do it, go ahead.
Yeah.
And then I think Wienker and Berman have a more conventional view towards recreational marijuana is that, it should be made legal, but we should tax it and regulate it and that kind of stuff.
Have some control and oversight over
the non-libertarian answer,
Okay, all right. Do any of them, because this also came up, I think, in the forum, do any of them have ideas on how to mitigate the consequences or risks to youth, for those who are in favor of legalization or decriminalization?
Well, I think at the forum this was addressed, and I think most people kind of agreed that if this is made legal and regulated, that would kind of have the opposite effect because youths then wouldn't have to kind of go to their drug dealers and kind of, it would kind of get the criminal element out of it, and there would be an age limit, so everybody would be carded, and it would be kind of like that. So,
It would be like cigarettes
so,
are.
Exactly, cigarettes, alcohol. So they thought they would be actually have a good impact on youth if it's kind of brought into the light.
Okay. One other issue that we covered in our grid, our candidates grid, very much outside of this area, Delta Tunnels, Jerry Brown's $15.5 billion plan for improving the way that the water gets from Sacramento area down to Southern California. How do people feel about that?
I think from people I spoke to, many of them still had a lot of education to do on this issue because it is very complicated and it's not something, unless you're really kind of into the weeds on environmental policies. But I think some of the candidates pretty much thought that it doesn't go far enough in protecting the environment. Like Berman and Vicky Wienker both had some problems with the plan. They both kind of, I think Vicky told me that she would support kind of more localized, like recycled water projects, things of that nature, as opposed to this major transfer. I feel like Jay Cabrera actually spent a lot of time researching this and knew quite a lot about it. He thinks because this has such an impact on both man and nature, there should be two different plans kind of put together for each category and not have them be kind of commingled. Because he thinks there's an inherent tension between what humans are trying to do and how it's going to impact nature. And then C. Reddy, didn't seem like he knew too much about it, but after reading it, he supports it.
Supports the water, okay. Thoughts from
Yeah,
South?
I think Gennady's right. A lot of candidates had to bone up on this subject.
Yeah, just
and journalists too.
Right, exactly.
Barry Chang opposes it. He thinks it ultimately wouldn't be a net loss environmentally to have the Delta tunnels. Inks basically said, I think I need to consult the best experts on this, and upon getting elected to office, then I will, review what my stance is on this. Kasperzak said he is cautiously in support of it, but he says that there had to be hefty mitigation as far as the environmental side of it.
Okay. And Otaki, did he have any particular leanings on this yet?
He mostly spoke about other sort of more local approaches to encouraging sort of water conservation.
Conservation, okay. All right. Well, this gives us a taste. We're 2 months out, I believe, from the primary. This hopefully gives people a sense of where the candidates are headed. Some of them seem fairly similar in stances. I think Berman and Vinker, to me, seem kind of similar philosophically and sometimes in the details as well.
In some ways, they both really care about education, and their career trajectories kind of reflect that it's not just the political stance, that they really do care. Because Berman was recently with the Education Foundation, and of course, Vinker, who secured actually the California Teachers Association endorsement. She's also been very involved in kind of researching the policies and advocating for more spending. So that seems to be their big concern, common concern.
Yeah, and then there's some people who kind of stand on their own. Inks is definitely one of them. So to some degree, Otaki, and being Republican in his views, stands a little bit apart, I think, in his answers to some of these issues. And then, we have 2 months to go, so we'll see how people land when they bone up a little bit more on these issues. One thing I wanted to do was just end with maybe a one-word, one-phrase summary for each of the candidates. Put you on the spot for that. Gennady, let's do the alphabetical thing again.
Okay, well, for Berman, I'm going to say Democrat with a capital D. I think of all of the 8 candidates, he's the most kind of aligned with the party line. He's been involved in the Democratic Party since he was a little kid, and he's been volunteering for all these national campaigns, for senators' campaigns. And so I think if you're just looking to elect somebody who's consistent with what Democrats would vote for, I think Berman kind of fits that well.
Okay, Democrat with a D. And then Cabrera?
I'll say Bernie.
Okay.
I feel like he's more concerned with the national issues than with the specifics of what's happening in the 44th district.
Fair enough. All right, Chang?
Chang, let's see, I would say he's running off of accomplishments very much. That's his linchpin. And, I think that, many people, many of his opponents might question whether, his accomplishments are really accomplishments. But I think that nevertheless, it's something that, he can point to many things that ultimately he can say have been triumphs under his tenure as mayor or city councilman in Cupertino.
Sure, okay. Inks?
Inks, principal. I where I stand, basically.
Right. Kasperzak?
Experience, definitely.
Yeah.
That's the thing he's running on, and I would say he's been fighting very hard with Berman for the endorsements of the Democratic Party, and I think that given that he formerly was a Republican in his younger days, has gone to the party later on. I think that hasn't found quite the support I think he expected among some of the higher ups in the Democratic Party. So nevertheless, he said that he still can point to a lot that he's done in his time, and I think that he can make a fair case as far as being having served the community for a long time.
Well, as far as the party goes, he's got a lot of competition, with the other candidates. So Otaki?
I'd say numbers. I think his experience in finance and balancing budgets with the city of Menlo Park, and then also on the fire protection district, which he served on. That was one thing he spoke about a lot.
Okay, the numbers guy. Very good. Reddy?
I'll say critic. I feel like most of the issues he talks about are his responses to things that come up locally, and he just offers his view on it as opposed to kind of initiating things.
Okay, and Vinker?
I'd say innovator. both because she's been dealing with a lot of innovators and because of her role in starting the soccer league. And I feel like she's undertaken a lot of very ambitious initiatives.
Okay. Well, Mark, Kate, Gennady, thank you so much for sharing what you know about the candidates. Hopefully this is a great way to get people started thinking about who they're going to vote for and looking into all the candidates. So thanks for the good discussion.
It's been fun.
Thanks.
So you can catch all of us on the web, whether at mvvoice.com, almanacnews.com, or paloaltoonline.com. We'll see you next week.